Awesome. Hey, everybody. I am TJ VanToll. I work as a developer advocate at Blues Wireless. And this is React Wednesdays. This is a show we do on every Wednesday, as the name implies, where we bring on cool and interesting people from around the front end, from around the React world, have us show us something new, something interesting, and learn a little something. So the website is telework.com/React-Wednesdays, and we're going to put that in the Twitch chat if you're watching this live. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can scroll down and find that in the description. It's a great place to check if you want to see previous episodes we've done or upcoming things that we have on the calendar. Today, we have a special guest. I'm going to welcome to the show Thomas Findlay. Thomas, how's it going?
Hi, not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to React Wednesdays. Do you want to start by just telling people who you are, what you do, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So, well, like TJ said, my name is Thomas. So I'm a full-stack web and mobile developer. I've been coding for about 10 years now. I'm also the co-owner of Findlay Web Tech and a mentor at CodeMentor.io. Besides that, I'm a technical writer for the Telerik and the Road to Enterprise blogs. And I also wrote 2 books, Vue the Road to Enterprise and React the Road to Enterprise, which basically are advanced books for, well, Vue and React frameworks.
That's very cool. I'm a previous book author, so I have some sense of the fun. Let's just say that those sort of things can be, but you also learn a lot too. So it's very cool. And today we're talking unit testing, right? So what's your background with unit testing? What made you get into that specifically?
Probably the same thing as everyone. Software that would break suddenly.
Yeah, that would do it.
Guess that will be a story of every developer. Either you need to fix something or add a new feature. You deploy code and then boom, something doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, well, that's why I test.
I feel like it's also one of those things too where you really don't appreciate unit testing until you see like something code you've written like fall apart, like until you've had to maintain something for a while, right? And then you start to see the value of like, oh, I don't even remember what I wrote. I don't necessarily trust that, and unless I have something to like prove that works, so I just sleep easier at night when I know that my code is well tested.
Oh yeah. Same, to be honest. And it especially can get tricky if you have to, let's say, modify a component that is really complex but was created by somebody else.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
There might be some edge cases or something like this, and so it can be really tricky then. So it's good to have a test suite.
Yep. Well, I know you got some stuff you want to show, so you want to just dive in, and we can use that to sort of drive the conversation here.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. So let me just share my screen. Okay, is it? Okay, yeah. So basically, what we'll talk about are best practices for testing React apps, and also I will show you how to write unit tests and E2E tests for React apps using Jest, Cypress, and React Testing Library. So we can skip that. Sorry to introduce myself. Okay, so why should we write tests? Well, we talked a bit about it just right now, but well, first of all, manual testing is time-consuming, right? And also, like, how many times can we test the same thing? And it's really, prone to human error because, the more complex the website is, the features are, the easier it is to just miss something, forget something, right? So that's one of the reasons why we should write automated tests. And another obvious advantage of automated tests is the fact that we can run them as many times as we want, right? We don't waste any time. We don't have to manually recheck every single thing. And we can run them either immediately when we make any code change or as part of the CI/CD pipeline, which, to be fair, should be, it's a must. Another good reason is because tests can help us find and fix bugs before they are shipped to the users, right? Well, I'm guessing not many developers, let's say, would like to get a call after hours from their manager or something like this, that the website is broken.
Yeah.
And something like this can cost businesses a lot of money. So it's definitely a good idea to have tests. And yeah, like we already mentioned, it's easy to break things. especially when you're working on a complex system and there are a lot of developers in a team. And like if you have to update a code that is touching many different parts in an application, right? Make one change and everything's broken. Well, tests are supposed to prevent shipping software with bugs, basically. So it will be easier to detect any regressions. And another useful thing is that tests can serve as basically as code documentation, because they document how the code should work. Okay, so there are a lot of different test types, to be fair, and this is just a small list actually, because there are much more.
Yeah.
So today we will focus on unit tests, like TJ mentioned, and also on the end-to-end tests with Cypress. So just to cover a few of them, what are the unit tests? Basically, they're supposed to test small units in your application. Like for instance, you could test helper methods or your components. You could test them in isolation. While integration tests are supposed to check if different modules and services work in cohesion together, right? While end-to-end tests, for instance, are supposed to check like the whole flow. Like for instance, can a user register, create an account? Can they log out? Can they log in after that? And can they just do different things depending on what your website does, right? So yeah, there are a lot of tests, and we don't have enough of time to cover all of them. To be fair, one could write multiple books about all of them.
Yeah, I'll say too, I do like focusing on unit and end-to-end though, because I find because for beginner people that are watching this or seeing this, you can get overwhelmed by seeing all these test types, but really you can get a whole lot done with just a good set of unit and end-to-end tests. And for a whole chunk of apps, like that's going to give you most of your value. Obviously, like as you scale up, you're building like a huge web app that's used by a lot of people. These other sorts of testing will absolutely help you, but I think like especially if you're beginning, like unit and end to end, you can get a whole lot of coverage, a whole lot of bang for your buck.
Yeah, definitely. To be fair, I think that most of the tests should really be end-to-end tests, and you should have a bit more, less of unit tests, and then the rest.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, TJ is definitely right with that. Okay. So next, what we will do is write some unit tests using Jest and React Testing Library. So what we will test is basically custom select component. Let me just refresh that. So basically, what it's supposed to do is it should allow us to specify a label, provide a list of options, right? We should be able to select one of them. And also, if there's an error and we pass specific props, it should display an error message, right? Which, for instance, disappears when the value is selected. So let me just walk you through the application. So this is a simple React app created with Create React App.
Could you real quick bump up the font size like one notch for me?
Sure.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, so let me also move this a bit. Okay, cool. So actually here I will just show you how we're using this. So we have a list of options that will pass to the select component. So basically ingredients with an ID, label, and value, right? So an array of objects. Then we just have one state to store the currently selected value, which at the start is undefined. So we have nothing selected, right? And then we just render the select component with a few props. So we're passing the label, the value, the handler, and so on and so on. So as you can see, I'm using Tailwind here for styling. And also I'm using headless UI as it provides really nice component primitives. And there's this just styled with Tailwind. So let's go from the top. So here we just have some types. So the most important one is select props, which basically specifies what kind of props this component accepts. So yeah, that's another thing. The code is written in TypeScript.
And real quick too, we had a request for the font size up one more notch. I think there's other people with horrible eyes like me here in the chat. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Is that better? Cool.
Yep.
Okay, so basically we destructure the props, and now we have quite a bit of markup here, classes. Most of the code is really, for the select, taken from the headless UI example. However, I did add some customizations, like for instance, we render label conditionally if it was passed as a prop. Similarly, we render an error message if there's an error. Yeah, otherwise, here we just basically have the list box component, which is provided by headless UI, and what we achieve with this component is basically that.
Yep.
Okay, so and now let's get to the more interesting part, which is testing. I will, however, mention the setup first. So, like I mentioned, we're using Jest here as well as React Testing Library. So I won't be showing how to set everything up exactly from scratch. Later on, there will be you will have a link to the GitHub repo where the project is. But I will just do a quick walkthrough. So, well, there's not much here. We're basically using the Jest DOM testing library to add a few useful matchers. And here in test utils, we have a bit of custom code. So basically, it's a custom render wrapper around the render method provided by testing library. So it allows us to just create our own methods and so on and so on. So if you're interested in getting to know more about it, just check testing libraries documentation because it's there. Okay, now let's have a look at the spec file where we'll write our tests. That's the correct one? Yes, it is. So again, we have a list of ingredients, which will be just passed as the options to the select. And here we have an interface for, render select props. So the thing is that, as you've seen, for instance, in the app component, we had to have, we had to use the use state, right? Because we need to be able to provide the selected value and then also set, update the state when a user selects one of the options. So that's why we need to create a wrapper component around the select. So basically, what we do here is we allow ourselves to pass some props, and we also set some defaults, so we don't have to pass them for every single test when they don't really change, right? However, if need be, we still have an option to update them. So for instance, we default to ingredients for the ID, we default to ingredients array for the options, and also we accept a default value if you would like to test if the select will render with a predefined value. This could happen, for instance, if you would be fetching the data for form, let's say, from the backend, right? Like you could have an edit form that would need to be pre-filled with information already. Okay, then next, obviously we have the state, which will store the selected ingredient, and what we return is the select component. And here we just have the render select helper, which will just render the select wrapper. And it calls the render method that I showed you previously that we export from test utils. It's over here, and it's this one here, custom render. As you can see, the custom render is renamed as render. Okay, so what do we have next? Okay, so I guess finally we can write some tests, right? So first of all, let's say we would like to check, if it renders with a default value, right? So what we can do here is call render select. And let's see, default value. So for instance, we could provide the value ingredients. Let's choose the second ingredient, which will be, what exactly? Potatoes.
Yeah.
And here it will, I think that's what you should do. And next, we need to check if this value is actually there in the select. So what we can do is, take advantage of the React Testing Library. So here we can access the GetByText method. And what we will pass there is ingredients, 1, and label. And I think that should actually for this test. Yep. And that's how we check if this select is now rendered with predefined value. So actually, we might have expected that we would need to do something like, expect, here we would pass the element and then to equal, something.
You anticipated my question. I was actually wondering, because I was like, where did the assertion actually come in?
So the testing library handles that for us, because the thing is that if it can't find what we passed there, it will just throw an error unless something changed.
Yeah.
There we go. See?
It's interesting though. I am surprised though that it will pass, because sometimes doesn't it complain if you don't have any assertions in an individual test? The failure case makes sense to me. The passing one is interesting.
Oh, this part, yeah. So actually, it will just pass because there are no test cases. So it's like, yeah, true.
Okay.
Whatever. So I mean, I can uncomment them out, so it's a bit clear, but yeah.
Yeah, I think too. I like this is also for anybody new to unit testing. What you just did here is also my preferred way of when you're writing a unit test. It's good to make sure it breaks first, right? Because that way you're writing the right. You're testing the correct thing, because you want to see it not work, and then you want to see it work before you say, yeah, I'm good with this. So I like this.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, I usually also just write the tests like this I want to write and then comment them out, because then if you write a lot of them, it might be quite easy to miss one. Like you have a few hundred lines and then there's one like this and all the test passes you might be just happy with, but then oops, actually something broke because there was a test I didn't write. Okay, and getting back to this, yeah, so basically if testing library can't find an element, it will just throw. So we don't have to write, the expect this to equal something, right? Because if it fails, then, well, it fails. And if it can find an element with this specific text, it will succeed, right? And to be fair, that's really all we want to check in this test. Check if the select renders the specific label, right, as a default value. And yeah, it does. And at least in this case, there would be no issue if, let's say, there would be no issue regarding the options because the options aren't even rendered. So testing library couldn't just, let's say, grab. Yeah, so if I, for instance, passed beef as a value or just wanted to check if beef is there, it wouldn't grab this element because the select component is initially closed. So these values aren't even there. So really the only text it can grab is this select option.
Yeah.
Which, if we provide a default value, would be something else. Oops. Let me just close that. Okay. So yeah, this test is done. Now, render the select with a label. So yeah, by default, the select component doesn't render the label, right? Element. And the label is optional. So let's test if it does it correctly. So what we can do is, again, render select, and we'll specify the label. And let's see, we'll say ingredients. And to be fair, we can, again, do the same thing. Screen, GetByText, ingredients. See, now two tests should pass. And we can confirm that it works by making fail on purpose. Yep, there we go. It's important not to stick to just the happy path.
Yes.
Okay, then. So that's it for testing the label. Yeah, testing if there's a text in a component is really easy. So open the select menu. So what do we need to do here? Let's have a look. So we need to, a user would click on the select, right? So we really need to do the same thing. When the select renders for the first time, there's text select option, right? So let's use that. But first of all, of course, we need to render the select. Then what we will do is, what we want to test is, right, actually, we need to, initialize a click on this select. So what we'll do is use fire event click. Then we'll get the button element there. Technically, we don't really need to get the button itself. We can get an element inside of it as well, and it will work, at least in this scenario. So let's do GetByText, and then it was select. I would just say options for now. Was it select options or select option? Select option, so it should fail. And yes, it failed. Now let's fix it. Okay, so, well, let's write the rest of the stuff. And here we want to check if it opens the select menu. Right, so how could we check it in this case? Let's see, what did I do for that?
You pass it options and see if the options are visible after you open it?
Yet. Well, technically, in this test, we don't really care about the options. What we care about is whether the options are visible, the drop down.
Yeah.
So let's see. So here we have this drop down, which is a UL element. And actually, we can query it by using the role. So let's query it by using the listbox role. So what we'll do here is screen get element. That was GetByRole and listbox. And actually, maybe here, probably just this would work, I think. Let's see. Yeah, but if we wanted to be more precise again, with expect, we could do to be visible. Also will work. If you would want to be more explicit, like what you want to achieve with this test exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
And there we go. And that checks if the drop-down menu is opened correctly. Okay, now let's see. Now we need to check if the options that we pass are correct and if they are correctly displayed over here, right? So what we will need to do is, again, we'll need to render the select. We'll need to open the dropdown. And then, well, we know that the ingredients options are already specified here, right? So we don't need to pass them explicitly, but let's do it. Options, ingredients. That's for this example. Then, well, technically we could, let's say, try to grab text by first, getting the list box and so on. However, we can actually look for ingredients, and then just try to get all of them just try to get all of them. So ingredient label. And that should pass. Yeah, there we go. And that's how we can check if select has correct options displayed. So yeah, basically we're just using the data that we provided previously, and then we check if it's there. And that's that.
Yeah, I like this too, because it's I'm relatively new to testing library, and what I appreciate is that it helps you also avoid putting implementation details into your tests as well, because I really like that there's no code that says get option elements, right? Because who knows how they're implemented under the hood, right? Instead, you get these more generic APIs that keeps your tests themselves pretty clean, and really not having to care too much about what the component is actually doing under the hood.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, testing library really encourages this type of testing. So basically, you shouldn't make tests another consumer of your application. Rather, you should write tests in a way like a user would use your app. And that's what we are doing, right? Well, obviously, we visit the website component.
Yep.
We find the button by text, just like a user would. Then we click on it, just like a user would, right? And then we just check if the ingredients are there. And what are they? Well, if they're not there, then GetByText method would throw an error. So we know that it passed. So yeah, testing library can really help a lot with writing not only good tests, but also making your tests like cleaner and more easier to maintain. Overall, you write less code. I mean, actually, I didn't have to add this expect, right? So we have already 4 tests, and I didn't really need expect even once, really.
Yeah.
So this is really great. Okay. So next test is can select an option and display it. So again, we'll need to render the select. So we don't need this option, so I'll remove it now. Then we need to obviously open the select. And then we need to click on one of the options. So let's do again fire event, click, screen, GetByText, and let's say ingredients. This time we will select 2. That would be label. So in this case, it will be the duck. And then we need to check if the if the select now has the correct value displayed by default. So get screen, let's try GetByText, was it? Actually, well, for a moment, when values are updated, dropdown might still be there. So far we were using GetByText mostly, and also GetByRole. So testing library actually heavily recommends using methods like GetByText, GetByRole, and it also has a few different ones. Just show you testing library, docs. Documentation is quite nice. Frameworks, React, the cheat sheet is very useful. There we go. By text, display value, placeholder text, label text, and so on. Right. So basically, or by role, for instance, it encourages really testing and grabbing elements, in a kind of accessible way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So like looking for role list box versus some option elements, for example, because you might implement a list box in different ways.
Exactly. And if, for instance, we can't really do it with any of them, we can always default to using byTest ID. So for example, just for this part here, I did add test ID to the button, right?
Yep.
We will use that. So let's go back to the test. So we GetByText ID.
Yeah, because I in this case, getting by text would be tricky because you need that text to be in a specific spot, right? You don't want the test to pass just because it shows up in an option. It needs to be. It needs to be someplace specific.
That's why we can't really get it by select option anymore.
Yeah.
And actually, this would fail if we provided a value. So that's an interesting thing to be aware of as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because the initial value would be different then. It wouldn't be select option anymore. Okay, so here, let me just specify an ID here, even though we have it here as well, ingredients. Well, so basically, the test ID will be select and ingredients. Note that here in this component, ID, it's concatenated basically with the select prefix. And so we're getting it by test ID. So now we'll need to use expect, and we'll check whether it has correct content. So this helper is coming from the testing library Jest DOM package. So that's another really useful library. It adds a lot of very good helpers, basically, to make it easier to test.
What was the name of that again? Because I don't think I've used that before.
There we go. Testing library Jest DOM.
Oh, Jest DOM. Okay. Got it.
So, I can definitely recommend using it. And, the text we wanted to have is basically, this label. So, it works. Fingers crossed. Yeah, it works. Awesome. So now the last part we want to test here is whether the select will show an error message. So what we can do is first render the select. And you know what? Actually, first let's check that it doesn't show an error message. Because I already did run into, I've seen components that by an accident would display an error message immediately. And sometimes they shouldn't. So what we will do here is, let me see. Okay, let's say we want to have an error message like, please select one of the options. Right? So what we will try to do is an element with this error message. However, instead of using GetByText method, we will use QueryByText. The difference is that GetByText will throw an error, and QueryByText will not. And well, we don't really want it to throw an error now because we want to check that it's not there.
Yeah.
So we'll use expect QueryByText. Of course, I need to pass this text pass here. So we expect this element not to be there, so we can say to be falsy. Okay, let's see.
Is to be falsy also from Just
I believe so, yeah. Or
that's
maybe
handy.
not. I would need to double check that.
Well, I feel like when I've used QueryByText before, my expects were not that clean. So
let's see. It's library. Just can quickly find out. Okay, to be falsy. No,
it's not. Yeah, I just looked on the same page. Interesting. I guess that's just another one I didn't know existed. So.
Oh yeah, there are loads of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think there's even one person who can remember all of them. And
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. If you meet one, let me know. Okay. Yeah. So this, of course, passes. So now let's check if the error message is displayed. So what we'll do is render select again. This time we'll pass error true and error message, which will be error message. So now we can just use the GetByText method and pass the error message there. And it should pass. And just for fun, we can check whether it will error out now, just in case. Yeah, it fails. Okay. Awesome. Well, and that's it for our tests. As you can see, it's actually quite easy to write tests when using, well, testing library, really, because most of these tests are, well, written with methods from it. Okay, so yeah, next, here are some testing tips. So it's good to test components in isolation. So you don't want to bring like your whole application, rather test small bits. Like for instance, now we tested the select component, right? You could have other components that you would test. But let's say you wouldn't, for instance, use a unit test to test like a whole, let's say, authentication flow, because that's not what unit tests are for. Well, let's say Cypress would be a better candidate for a test like this. So basically, you could do it as part of your end-to-end tests when you're testing your user flows. Now, second, it's a good idea to mock API requests and any side effects, because again, unit tests should be done in isolation, and they should be fast. And API requests, well, we'll get to it, but they should be tested as part of E2E tests. Now, shallow mounting, that's an interesting thing, right? Because you can mount your components shallowly to basically increase the speed of the tests, right? So it doesn't take so much time. The thing is that shallow mounting, basically, let's say in the example of our select component, would just mount the select component, but would mock any other components inside, which really isn't the best. Well, at least in this case, we actually need the other components. But the point is that, well, actually, as a mentor, I have met quite a few developers who had issues with shallow mounting because, for instance, they couldn't find some elements and they didn't know why. And the reason for it was shallow mounting, because they just weren't there, they were mocked. And from experience, I can tell that basically shallow mounting is just isn't worth it. It brings more problems than it solves, really. So next, yeah, so query elements, just like a user would, we talked about this already, don't really use classes or IDs because they can change, especially classes. So try to use things that wouldn't really change often, like roles or data attributes that you would set, like a data test ID or just text. And yeah, again, test should not be another consumer of your application. So you should avoid basically testing implementation details. For example, it shouldn't matter to our test, how this select is created. What really matters is whether it displays the label. Can we select, an item from the list of options, and so on and so on, right? It doesn't matter whether we're using some primitives from, let's say, Headless UI, or we created the select ourselves. So basically, what we just test is the HTML output, right? We provide the input, so the props, the options, and so on, and then we just test the HTML, and that's it. It doesn't matter how this HTML is created. Similarly, it wouldn't matter to a user, right? I guess to us developers it matters, right? So that's okay. What framework did they use for this website?
Exactly.
But most of the users don't care.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Well, and you could even, like, to your point, you could totally swap out how you implemented this select like completely and still have these tests pass. Like, I think the only thing you'd need to make sure is the data test ID made it in there. Well, as long as you did that, this could be built with pretty much absolutely anything, which speaks to your recommendations, right? Because that's not always 100% possible, but that's definitely what you want to strive towards.
So a good example, for instance, would be a switch from class components to hooks, right? You would, let's say, recreate the exact same component and functionality using hooks, right? When converting from class components. And if you had tests for a specific component like that, it should just pass, unless obviously you broke something. But if you didn't break anything and you just converted it well, then the test should still just pass. That's it. That's the whole point. Basically, you're making them future-proof in this case. Because you might change, let's say, some basically implementation details. You might change how functionality works kind of inside. But if the input and output are the same, then yeah, they will still work. And yeah, the last tip, don't test third-party libraries. Because the thing is that third-party libraries should have their own test suites. So there's no point really in writing your own. Before anyone asks, in this case, we do have, we are using the Headless UI, right? But note that these are just component primitives. So we use these primitive components and added our own stuff here, basically to make one custom component. So that's why we're testing things. Because for instance, let's say I could forget about this list box button, or just break something with it, or have an overlay over it that wouldn't allow a user to click on the select. Well, that wouldn't be the best. So that's why we still write tests in this case. But I wouldn't write tests specifically against the library components.
Yep.
Okay, so that's it for unit tests. And next we'll be writing a few end-to-end tests with Cypress. And again, Cypress Testing Library. Okay, so let me just switch to a different folder.
If anybody has any questions too, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'm keeping an eye on that, and I can relay them also.
Okay. So let me just start it. So now be test to Okay, so again, simple React project created with Create React App. So let me just give you a quick walkthrough. So here we have Cypress JSON with some basically config. So the base URL of the app is localhost 3000. And so we're starting just with one command here, because I'm using a package called start server and test. So basically it will first start the application, and only then it will start the test runner, in this case Cypress. So it's quite useful. So you don't have to manually run first, say yarn start and have some custom script for waiting when it's ready and only then start the test. Well, this one library will handle it for you. Okay, so here we have the Cypress directory. So what we have here is integration folder. So that's where we will write our end-to-end tests. Then we have plugins. So in plugins, we can basically, override the config, add some plugins and so on. We won't really be diving into it as we don't need it for today. And then in the support directory, we can create helper commands. So for example, here it shows how to create a login command or jack command and so on. Though really the only commands we'll be importing are from testing library. And then in index, we just import commands and that's it. And Cypress does the rest of the job here. I see I'm missing one directory and an import file. Oops, so let me just add it. So the directory we're missing is fixtures. Fixtures or fixture. Yeah. I think I should show you first what actually we'll be testing. Let me just refresh. So we have here simple register form with a name, surname, address, city, email, password, right? So we need to go through different steps. So fixtures are basically files with data that you will use during your tests. For instance, we'll have a user registration data fixture with some information that we'll use for the form. And next, we can, I think, head to register form. And so we'll write, really 3 tests here. First one for visiting the page, the second one for filling in the form, and the third one for submitting it, and checking that the form payload that was sent after submission is correct. So first, at the start, we have this little helper, go next. So as you can probably already guess, is just for clicking on the next button. Then we have the user data. So that's the data that we need to enter into the form. And let's write some tests. So before each test, we need to load, we will load the user registration data. Was it that? Let me just double check it. Yeah, exactly that. So we can do that using the fixture method. Then we need to specify the path. It's relative to the fixtures folder. So in this case, it will be user registration data.json. In the as method, we will name it as user data. Okay, and with the previous command, which I ran to start the test. So what will happen after the server is started? We will have a small pop-up here with our tests. So the only test we have is register form. So we can click on it, and Cypress will start a browser, and it will run the tests. Obviously, we don't really have any tests right now, so let's write them. So first, we need to visit the page. So at the moment, it's running at localhost 3000. So visit the page by using the visit method. 3,300. Okay. Oh yeah, there it is, register form. Cool, and next, let's say we will confirm that we're there by checking if there is the register form text. So we can, for instance, do CI find by text, and we want to find the register form, and we will check if it exists. Oh, does it exist? No? Okay, what's the problem?
Yeah, if you can bump up the font size in that window too.
In this window.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
It's a little. If you can't, that's fine. We can make it work.
No, I can't with. Yeah,
that's all right. We got to put in a feature request to Cypress.
Maybe it is already supported. Just I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah.
It looks like a timeout, probably.
Yeah, so it expected it to exist. I mean, it looks like it didn't even visit it correctly. Let me just double check that. So before, my bad, I put it in the wrong place. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to exist before you visit the
There
page.
we go. So this is the page. Yeah, and actually here Cypress will show us what happened exactly, right, during the test. Like here it visits the page. It will even highlight the URL. Then it shows us find by text, right, and even highlights the element that was found. And then it shows us the assertion. So it expected this element with these classes to exist in the DOM. And yeah, it does. And obviously, if we put the wrong text, like register 123, well, the test, then fail. Yep, there we go. Voila.
Yep.
It failed. Okay. So now we want to fill in the form. So first, we need to get access to our fixture, right? So we can do so by running CI get, and then we just pass the user data type. That's what we will expect to get there, and that will be, okay. So we need to use the @ sign and then the name of this fixture that we defined here. User data, and then we need to train then. Let me just note one important thing. The then that we're using here in Cypress, it's not a promise. So it's Cypress has its own implementation there, so you can't just await it. Yeah, so just remember that.
This is okay. I'm going to let you finish typing this, and then that get call though looks like black magic. I'm wondering what is happening there.
I mean, so basically here in the before each test, right? We load a fixture. I mean, specifically this fixture here, and we name it as user data.
Okay, so this then is basically that gives you the contents of that JSON file like in an easily accessible way then.
So basically first we get something. In this case, we get our named fixture.
Okay.
And then we change the then to get access to it.
Okay.
Because like I mentioned, we can't just do something like, async and const user equals await, because these aren't promises, basically. That's why we need to chain then.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now we can fill the form in. So what we will do, let's see. So yeah, each input field has a label, right? So we can just get access to the input fields by using their labels. So let's do just that. So there'll be CI find by label text, and of course this is one of the commands coming from testing library. And here we want to find by name, and what we will do is type user name. And the second field is surname. User surname.
I have to say too, TypeScript has come in handy during this step. Like you could just see the value of it, like as you're typing this, right? Because especially like you said, these testing libraries have a lot of methods, and it's easy to forget what they're called. So just having that autocomplete is so nice.
It is totally. It's like all of them are here, and it just
find by whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's one of the big advantages of TypeScript. It's like the feeling when you work, using TypeScript for a long time, and then you need to switch to pure JavaScript project.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that. I was like, wait, where's the autocomplete? It doesn't work. Why? Yeah, so TypeScript definitely is amazing, and just besides autocomplete, right, and suggestions, just the fact like how much confidence it provides when you refactor code, right? Because basically TypeScript allows you to define kind of a type contract, right, in your code between different pieces. And if you break this contract in one place, a TypeScript compiler will scream at you until you fix it. So this is really great, because if you make some big changes, you basically won't be able to compile your code until you fix all of them.
Yeah, because it's better to be screamed at during development than to find it in production, a couple days later.
Better to be screamed by Typescript compiler than your boss, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's see how it looks like. So, it doesn't fill in the form.
I think you got the values, but you didn't. Oh, actually, no, you did. Never mind.
Okay, interesting. So what's the deal here? Find by label, type. Oh, wait a sec. Did I update this? Let me just see. Source components. Yeah, 1 second. And this forgot to add the name properties to every input field. Okay, it should work now. See, that's why tests are important.
Yeah, exactly. Because your labels in your should have a 4 that matches the name of your inputs. But hey, that's it.
Still doesn't work for some reason. So
Oh.
Name, yeah, this is correct. I just need to rerun the tests. Yeah, find by label name type. Okay, yeah, I'll just start the test again, I guess.
Yeah, because it looks like it found it okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of weird.
It's not typing in, so there could be basically something else happening. I mean, on field change, name value, submit. Yeah, they have correct name attributes. Well, we'll see in a sec. That's the fun part, isn't it? When during presentation, just something stops working and it's unexpected.
I usually though, like it's funny, especially with doing this on like a Twitch live format, is I think people also learn and appreciate seeing someone debug through an issue. Like I'm sort of learning how you're using the Cypress tool there is kind of interesting that it shows you, like, we know the problem is not that it couldn't find the input per se, because it knows where it's supposed to go because of the highlighting, which is interesting.
So what we can do in this case is actually visit the app and see if it does enter. Okay, so this works correctly here, but in register form, it doesn't. Okay, so let's try to debug it. Yes, I am in the correct directory. All the files because we don't need them. Now, like I said, this, yeah, I did add correct attributes. You just need to compare. Yeah, this looks correct. And well, the app itself works. It doesn't work during the test. So yeah, let me just double check that. We have this user data.
Are you able to test, like in the Cypress runner? Are you able to type? Like, I'm wondering if you could try typing in there just to make sure that works.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
Let's look at that works. Yeah, because why wouldn't it? It is the app. So.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really surprised because it should just work. Let me just I'll check the Cypress version. 8. Okay, now.
It's weird that the thing I can't get over is like it doesn't it runs correctly, which is weird because you think .type would just completely fail.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
so find by label text, is that going to maybe find that does correctly find the input, right, and not the actual label? Okay.
Yes, so see here, it is finding by label text the input, and then it's typing. So the type command is executed correctly. The thing is that for some reason, it's not typing it in. That's
right, because it would actually execute the typing right into the inputs, or at least it's supposed to.
Oh, let me just actually run the final code from the final example.
Yeah,
just to see if it will work.
Okay, it totally
typed.
It
worked.
So hold on. Now go back to your code. What is different?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so let's have a look. Maybe one. And yeah, TypeScript, yes. We have Fixture. This is the same. Okay, did it type in correct stuff there? I think it did. So we have, yeah, we're loading the Fixture. We're visiting the website, find the text, that's fine. And then find by label text, name, type, username. It's the same. So question is, what's different? Yeah.
Is it maybe the name of, because you typed in the name of that fixture, is user registration data spelled correctly?
So from what I've seen, the value was there. See this? Type John. So yes, the fixture is loaded correctly.
Oh yeah, because it had to get that.
So what we can try to do is maybe, well, I mean, we can use a console log here, but we know that the name is there because even Cypress dashboard is showing it to us. So the thing is, what's different? I mean, between these two. Let's say I will just copy this explicitly.
Yeah, like copy increasingly large chunks until it works.
Exactly. Yeah, usually I go the other way, like I comment out all the code and then uncomment piece by piece. So this still fails. I mean,
do the like the .get, right? Like I would just keep going.
What do you mean?
So from the code on the right, like you can copy like even the .get call because you didn't get the when you copied and pasted.
Yeah. Let's do
just
that.
To make sure that's identical, even though it looks like
yeah.
Because then the other thing, it's got to be the before each, right?
Wait, interesting thing. Wait a sec. You know what? Now I have all of these here, right?
Actually, hold on one second. Can you go back?
Oh, yeah, sure. 1 sec.
Can you scroll up a little bit? Is that async? Did you leave that async in there? When you were showing off how that does actually work, neither of us caught and that you left that word in there.
Yeah.
Programming is fun.
Someone just commented that it ended being a straight diff, right? Funny thing. I did have a mentee once with whom I had a session. They had a problem because there was some weird white space at the top of the website. Just they couldn't find what was the problem. And it turned out that at the top of index.html file, there was just some weird word.
Oh man. You might want to just skip ahead to the end anyways, because I know I want to be cognizant of people's times and your times. Just maybe like show off the final stakes. We did have another question or two come in that I want to chat about before we go.
So I'll just quickly explain it. Here, basically, we're just filling the form. And obviously, we have a stepper. So we need to go to the next step every time. And so let's see. Yeah, it's filling it in. And then it submits the form. So in submit the form, what we're doing is we're actually intercepting the post request that is executed when the form is submitted. So this is just a setup for it, right? Then we find the submit button and click on it because we want to submit the form. And over here, we're waiting for this API request to happen for the post user. So again, we did use as to name it as post user, and we're waiting for it. And when finally it happens, this callback here is executed. So what we're checking is we're getting again the user data fixture, and we just check if the payload sent matches our fixture, right? So this way, basically, we test the whole process between the input, which is filling in the form, and the output, which is basically the API request that will be sent to the server. Because like we just had a problem, right, with the inputs. For some reason, we couldn't fill them in. Well, in this case, it was the problem with the test. However, for instance, this would fail if I forgot the name attribute.
Yeah.
On it. There we go. So basically, the state wasn't updated correctly, so it was missing from the payload. So that's how we just tested the whole process, right? And yeah, finally, when the yes,
it's just that intercept is really slick, because that's a nice way of sort of injecting your test data into this.
Yeah, so you can use Cypress to intercept API requests, and you can even mock them and respond with your custom data if you want to. Okay, so yeah, let's proceed then. So yeah, that's it for writing E2E tests. So here are some testing tips. Basically, avoid mocking API requests if you can. Basically, E2E tests should test whether client and server work together in cohesion. And I have a really good example of this, because again, one of my other clients, he needed help with writing Cypress tests, and he wanted to basically be able to get through the login process to a dashboard, right? And yeah, he just couldn't figure out why he couldn't log in. So finally, I told them, okay, did you maybe check if the login works on the actual website? Because everything was mocked, not just some API requests, like literally everything.
Yeah.
Whole login process, all the API requests and so on, right? And okay, so we went to the original website and tried to log in. Voila, the login didn't work. So, but the thing is that the login didn't work on the original website, but it did work in the tests because they were mocked. Yeah, exactly. So one might argue that basically, if you don't mock API requests, then tests take so much longer to run, right? Though I think it's worth the trade-off, especially if your website is making millions, and let's say shipping a bug and making your website crash could cost a lot. I think in this case it's better to just have these tests run a bit longer. Now, also 100% coverage shouldn't really always be a must, as otherwise we'll just start testing implementation details and try to test like near impossible scenarios, because sometimes we do need to add code for like edge cases, because there are still browser incompatibilities, like Safari is the new IE and so on. And another one, don't test only happy paths, right? Like for instance, here we just tested if a user can fill in the form and submit it, right? But what about the validation? This should be tested as well. What about, let's say, if a user would be able to submit the form, but there would be a problem during the submit request, like let's say they lost an internet connection or there was a problem with the server. We should check if a correct error response would be displayed, so the user is informed about what happened and what they should do next. And regarding authentication logic, so you can reuse it, because there's really no point in going through the login form for every single test. That would be a bit unnecessary. So do test login flow, but also have some, like let's say, custom command helper to just go through it quickly. So in a nutshell, automated tests can save a lot of time and reduce likeliness of shipping buggy software. And it's a good idea to set up a CI/CD pipeline, so that whenever, let's say, you commit and push to, let's say, GitHub repo, tests will run automatically. So you don't even merge code to different branches. You basically wouldn't merge code that doesn't work. And you can also run tests automatically locally with Husky as you're coding, right? I mean, if you prefer, let's say, test-driven development, you can just write tests first and then write the code, and your tests will run along. And another important thing, tests, should be maintained as well, just like the production code. You shouldn't treat it as a second-class citizen, but as the first one, because they're really important. And so if you want, here's also a link for the code examples and slides. And that's it for today. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Code Mentor, and also my D-R2 Enterprise website. And if you'd like to learn more about testing and other advanced concepts like local and global state management patterns, project architecture, and so on and so on, you can check out React Road to Enterprise.
Awesome stuff, man. So I just put a link to the GitHub repo in the chat, and I'm going to get some of these other links, toss them in the chat as well. We did have one question come in that I promised I would get back to, because somebody was asking about elaborating a little bit more on not testing implementation details. So that was about more of the unit testing, like not testing the implementation details of, like, say, a select implementation. So I think they were just looking for some more details on, like, why not to do that or how to approach that.
Okay, so why not to do that? I think we covered it, but basically there was an example of converting your app from class components and to React hooks, for instance, right? If you were testing a component using specific features of a class component and you converted it to hooks, your test would fail because these features wouldn't be available there anymore. Because basically the whole implementation is different. However, if you basically test input and output, so if you provide specific input and the output of the component is the same, it doesn't matter what's inside of this component. What really matters is what happens. It's like if we provided these specific options to select, and we should be able to open the dropdown, select one of the options, and it should be displayed as a selected option, right? And we don't care about how it's done. We care about what's done.
Yep. So, it gives you more flexibility because, like, inevitably you tests, like you said, tests are going to be code that you have to maintain. So if you write your test code that's too fragile and is tied to your code, then as you update, as you maintain your project, you're going to have tests that break all the time. You're just going to get annoyed by it. So the more, I guess, like the more you can isolate your tests from the actual details of how they're implemented, just the happier you'll be. Just not always. It's one of those things that comes with experience too. It's you sort of need the test to break a few times and for you to get annoyed before you start sort of approaching them with that mindset.
Yeah. So just for instance, a simple example, right? Let's say we would try to grab a button by its class, right? But later on, we would update the component and actually change this class because we wanted to, let's say, the button to be somewhere else in a component.
Yeah.
Basically, this test would now fail because this class wouldn't be there. That's that.
Yeah, and maybe and it might not necessarily fail for an obvious way too. So you might be then, because that's like that scenario, like you can debug that within a few minutes, but it might be something internal to the button that you changed that caused it to break, and then all of a sudden you're 30 minutes debugging because you have an async in there or whatever, right?
Exactly. Or maybe you forgot a wait or something like that, or deleted it. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Hey, man, this was awesome. I just dropped some of the links into the chat, so your Road to Enterprise book in there, some of the other stuff in the chat, so you can check that out as well. But thanks for joining us. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks for having me.
Cool. And for everybody else, again, it's tabletop.com/React-Wednesdays, where we put up previous episodes and upcoming shows. So check that out. But yeah, until next week. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.